It's been a massive week for cold cases. This is Murder Week for Friday, October 5th. Beginning with old business. There will be no public document released following the autopsies in the Colorado Watts murders. They should be sealed in order to ensure a fair trial, according to the judge. The autopsies are seen as key evidence because Chris Watts claimed that he witnessed Shanann strangling their daughters, which is why he killed her in a rage. That's his story and he's sticking to it. Meanwhile, Shanann Watts had no will. And the trial of Bruce McArthur, who I mentioned last week, has been continued until the 22nd, so not a whole lot of information there. He was charged with 8 counts of first-degree murder and made a brief Wednesday morning court appearance via video link. There is a media blackout in place. He appeared tired. And the Border Patrol serial killer probably tracked the police who were investigating him. Juan David Ortiz, a Border Patrol intelligence supervisor, was arrested September 15th, one day after a woman escaped his vehicle and alerted authorities. Webb County Sheriff Chief Federico Garza told USA Today that investigative information about the murders had likely crossed Ortiz's desk since local police often share information with Border Patrol and other law enforcement agencies. For instance, Ortiz likely knew that the authorities were off his trail after Ramirez was murdered on September 3rd. Police began searching for a black truck or a black Cadillac, whereas Ortiz drove a white Dodge Ram. Here's some new stuff that's going to blow your mind. A cold case in Utah is blamed on Robert Brashers, a dead serial killer. Greenville police announced the identity of a now-deceased suspect in the 1990 killing of Genevieve Zatrisky at an apartment near Villa Road. Zatrisky was 28 years old. He sexually assaulted her, beat her, and strangled her. Threw her in the bathtub. This guy was pretty prolific. He was convicted in 1985 of beating and shooting a woman in Port St. Lucie, Florida, and was released in 1989. As soon as he got out, he raped and killed Zatrisky in her apartment. And another cold case solved. Scott Lee Kimball, also known as Hannibal, was a serial killer and a fraudster. 4-time killer, murdered from January 2003 to August 2004 and was finally arrested on March 14, 2006. He pled guilty, sentenced to 70 years in prison. He bragged of committing dozens of murders.
Asking for your help identifying the murder victim of a 20-year-old cold case. The woman was found back in 1998 about 40 miles north of Lake Powell. Her body was covered with plastic bags, wrapped in duct tape, tied with a rope, and placed inside a sleeping bag before being wrapped in a carpet.
Goodness.
No missing persons were ever reported. No one ever came forward saying this is, a loved one of mine. Fingerprints were not an option in this case.
Investigators have considered serial killer Scott Kimball a possible suspect in the murder. He's currently serving a 70-year prison sentence in Colorado.
And a pizza delivery driver saves a kidnapped woman after she mouths, "Help me."
It was business as usual at the Domino's in Plymouth on Monday.
You got her, Scotty.
But just days before, a driver had a delivery that was out of the ordinary.
Honestly, it's kind of scary.
Joey Grundle took a pie to this home on West 2nd Street in the village of Waldo when this man, Dean Hoffman, answered the door.
Gave him his pizza, and then I noticed behind him was his girlfriend,
who was secretly trying to get Grundle's attention.
She pointed to a black guy that was quite visible. She mouthed the words, "Call the police."
When he left, that's exactly what he did.
Sheboygan 911, what is the address of the emergency?
718 2nd Street in Waldo. And I had a delivery, and it was some middle-aged couple. And it looked like the woman clearly had a black eye. She pointed to it, and I swear she mouthed, "Help me."
Sheriff's deputies arrived and eventually were able to make entry. The woman told them she thought she was going to die that night. Court documents say her ex-boyfriend, Dean Hoffman, entered her home without permission, punched her, giving her a black eye and bloody nose, bound her hands together and her feet, hog-tying them, and then took a towel and shoved it in her mouth.
House of horror.
Neighbors are mortified.
I hope she's okay.
Thankfully, she is. Deputies say Hoffman had a .22 caliber firearm in a case in the trunk and threatened to shoot both of them.
Yeah,
I'm grateful he was paying attention, because it could have been a lot worse.
And Hoffman was arrested and is
Order some more
facing
pizza.
charges including kidnapping, false imprisonment.
Good job. Tip your pizza guy. And a former Texas hospital nurse has been accused of being a serial killer. A former nurse at Tyler, Texas-based Lewis and Peaches Owen Hart Hospital and Christus Mother Francis Hospital in Tyler is accused of injuring patients, some fatally. William George Davis faces 3 additional charges of ag assault with a deadly weapon and 1 charge of capital murder. Officials said they believe Mr. Davis intentionally injected air into arterial lines of patients recovering from heart surgery, making them have stroke-like symptoms. And finally, a killer in Chicago is randomly murdering everyone. Chicago gunman randomly shoots 2 people dead in 48 hours, sparking fears of a serial killer on the prowl. Police released new videos of the man suspected of murdering 2 people while warning frightened neighbors that he probably lives nearby. Turning to legal news, Dylan Millard had it all. Then he decided to start killing everyone. An Australian serial killer staged his own father's suicide. This one's great. Just 6 years ago, Dylan Millard was one of Canada's most eligible bachelors. Young, handsome, and fun-loving, Millard had become an instant millionaire at 27 following the apparent suicide of his aviation mogul father, Wayne Millard, who was found dead in his bed in 2012. It was the second tragedy to strike Millard in a very short space of time. Just 4 months earlier, he killed his girlfriend, Laura Babcock. Police had originally ruled his father's death a suicide. During the next few months, he dedicated himself to frittering away the old man's fortune, buying a string of million-dollar properties and a fleet of luxury cars. On the weekends, he hosted pool parties at his sumptuous McMansion in suburban Etobicoke and dabbled in off-road racing. Millard also began doing and dealing large quantities of drugs with his friend Mark Schmidt, who shared Millard's penchant for decadence and illegal enterprise. I love this article. It keeps giving and giving and giving. And a terror squad tilts Toontown after some police speculation if they were even involved.
She's in the terror squad. She shot Dylan Phillips with intent, but a judge found the killing was not linked to the gang. And that's why he found Shaylin Sutherland Casius guilty of second-degree murder and not first. The 20-year-old was charged with first-degree murder, but in order for that conviction, the Crown had to prove the shooting was done to benefit, directed by, or in association with the terror squad. The Crown didn't succeed in proving that, but says it's still happy with the outcome.
A prisoner who helped convict Willem Devon Howell got 8 years taken off his sentence for his contribution. The prisoner, who was not named, provided critical evidence against Howell, who was serving 6 consecutive life sentences. Howell was arrested in September 2015 for murdering 5 women and 1 man after authorities discovered their bones buried in separate plots in the woods behind a New Britain shopping mall off Hartford Road, just south of the busy Corbin's Corner shopping area north of Route 9. Authorities were led to the burial ground by another prison inmate, a triple murderer who had befriended Howell in prison and drew for police a detailed map of where the bodies were buried based on several jailhouse conversations with Howell. When charged with the 6 murders in 2015, Howell was serving a 15-year prison sentence for killing Nilsa Arizmendi, who disappeared from a grocery store parking lot in Wethersfield in 2003. Her body has not been found. And the story you all turned in for is a big nothing burger, apparently. Notorious serial killer Paul Bernardo, also known as the Scarborough Rapist, murdered up to 4 people, raped 13, 6-time attempted rapist, was found with a janky shiv, and so he's back in court. And since then, the Crown dropped the charges. Though the shiv was pretty janky. It made it with a screw and a pen handle at a maximum security prison. And finally, in killer-related news, an evil Scottish serial killer named Dennis Nilsen hated losing at Scrabble and cheated. He died in crippling pain in prison back in May. He strangled and drowned his victims before having sex with their bodies. Alan Baker, who since 2011 lives as a woman called Sarah Jane Baker, says she used to play board games with him while they were in the same jail. Baker also played the violin, while Nilsen played the piano. Whether we were playing Scrabble or chess, Dennis hated to lose, and I often spied him trying to find the blank Scrabble tiles. Yet I never felt unsafe in his company, although I was aware of the horrific crimes that he had committed. Finally this week, move over Mary Berry. There's another great British bake-off. Serial killer Rose West wins first prize in prison bake-off. Oh my goodness. Gloucestershire serial killer Rose West has reportedly whisked up a winning cake in a prison bake-off contest. Her Victoria Sponge has won first prize in the competition at Low Newton Prison amid claims she tries to avoid being attacked by handing out her homemade sweet treats. However, she is on a prison diet after eating a little bit too many of those sweets. The 64-year-old is supposed to avoid eating them herself after allegedly ballooning and being warned to diet or face health problems. She was convicted of 10 murders in 1995 and is currently serving life. And that's going to do it for this week. Thanks a lot for tuning in.